By noon, I'd lost my job. By 2 p.m., I opened my bedroom door and found my wife and my boss on the sheets I financed with overtime. In my hand, a signed $25 million licensing deal, the one they thought they'd steal before I could breathe. My name is Alex Carter, Houston, Texas, 34, engineer. I built an AI on my own time, my own gear, nights and weekends while they tracked me like a lab rat. That day they fired me, nothing personal, then tried to take everything personal, my marriage, my work, my future. If you think this ends with a screaming match and broken furniture, you don't know me. I don't do fists. I do facts. In the next 60 minutes, you'll see how a single signature turned betrayal into ammunition, and why two people who believed they were untouchable ended the night speechless in a room full of Houston's elite. Ask yourself now, is this revenge or a resurrection? I'm Alex Carter, 34, Houston, Texas. I'm the guy neighbors ask to fix a router, the one who mows at 7 a.m. before the heat sets in. My work? Building tools that make trucks show up on time and shelves stay full. Not sexy, just useful. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon, more like a plastic fork from a roadside diner, so I learned to make things work, even when the instructions were missing. On Saturdays, I'd hit Home Depot, buy the wrong size screws, and figure it out anyway. That's me. Steady, stubborn, practical. I track miles on my Civic, max my 401k, and call my mom on Sundays. People like me don't headline scandals. We show up. We stay late. We believe effort pays. I didn't know it yet, but effort alone won't save you when people you trust are measuring your steps like a stopwatch. The day I learned that, the ground under Houston felt like it shifted. Brooke Lancaster entered my life like air conditioning in August. Cool, effortless, a relief I didn't know I needed. We met at a tech mixer where I was holding a warm Sprite and a name badge that kept peeling off. She had this PR polish but asked real questions about family, faith, and whether I ever took time off. We grabbed tacos at a food truck on Montrose and laughed at how bad I am at small talk. She said I had kind eyes. I said she had decisive eyebrows. We traded stories about hand-me-down cars and apartments with thin walls. She made me think about more than code and deadlines, like where to spend holidays and whether rescue dogs pick you or you pick them. When her hand found mine crossing Westheimer traffic, it felt like we were stepping into a future together. I didn't hear the clock start ticking that night, but it did. Quiet, steady, counting down to something I never imagined. We bought the house in the Woodlands with paint swatches stuck to our fingers and a mortgage that looked like a dare. The realtor called it move-in ready, which meant the dishwasher groaned and the guest room smelled like old cinnamon. We didn't care. We saw Christmas lights on the eaves, a grill on the patio, a nursery someday. I learned the HOA rules by heart, and Brooke picked a shade of white that had a name longer than the Declaration of Independence. On weekends, we built shelves, misread measurements, and ate takeout on the floor. The neighbors waved, the sprinklers worked, and for a while I believed the simple math. 2 incomes, 1 plan, steady climb. We framed our first photo by the front door. Brooke's smile wide, my arm around her shoulders, keys in my hand like a trophy. That night, we fell asleep to cicadas and central air humming. I promised myself I'd protect this house, this life. I meant it. TechFlow paid the bills. The real work happened after hours, at my kitchen table. I sketched routes on napkins, turned delivery chaos into maps that made sense, and taught a small model to see traffic like a stubborn chess problem. No fancy lab, just a laptop that ran hot and a fan that never quit. I kept it simple, fewer detours, fewer delays, fewer excuses. It wasn't about changing the world, it was about showing up on time with insulin, parts, food, things that matter. I tested it on weekends, woke at 2 a.m. to fix a bug, and labeled files like a librarian with insomnia. At TechFlow, I stayed in my lane. At home, I had lanes of my own, cleaner, faster, mine. Brooke would kiss my head and say, "Don't burn out, hero." I laughed, saved my work, and backed it up twice. The day it finally ran end to end without choking, I sat back and whispered, "We did it." I should have locked the door. Mark Reynolds wore success like a well-fitted suit. He remembered birthdays, sent thank you emails, and stood too close in glass-walled meetings. He sold teamwork with a smile that said, "But not your idea." I learned his rhythms: Monday motivation, Friday pressure, Saturday quick syncs that ate family time. He wasn't loud, he was precise. "Great start, Alex. Loop and ops. Love the direction. Park it until Q4. Praise like breadcrumbs, progress like a treadmill." Older folks will know this type, the boss who shakes your hand and counts your fingers. He'd pat my back leaving the elevator, then claim my talking points 2 floors later. I told myself it was office politics, the tax for stability. When he asked about my weekend tinkering, I kept it vague. "Just cleaning the garage." He nodded, eyes on my reflection in the glass. That's the thing about polite men. If you don't look closely, you'll miss the knife. One day, I felt the handle. The hours crept up like Texas humidity. "Quick favor?" turned into midnight decks. Urgent meant dinner in a to-go box. I kept saying yes because good men say yes, right? My dad worked doubles. My mom stitched paychecks together. We don't ghost responsibility. We live with it. I missed a barbecue with friends, a game night, one more Sunday nap. Brooke would half joke, "Your laptop has seniority." I promised the season would end. Seasons always do. I tracked time like receipts, 30 minutes here, 2 hours there, until my calendar looked like a spilled box of crayons. The small pleasures, fresh coffee, a quiet drive, a decent back porch sunset, started feeling earned instead of free. I told myself I was building momentum, that pressure turns coal into diamonds. Truth is, pressure also cracks pipes. One night, staring at a blinking cursor and a cold slice of pizza, I realized something simple and sharp. If I don't set a line, someone else will draw it for me. The first cracks didn't look like cracks. Brooke worked later, answered texts in the kitchen instead of on the couch, and started using words like alignment at home. We ate separately more often, her salad, my leftovers. She said she was networking, getting our future in motion. I wanted to believe her. Married folks in their 30s know the drift. Life narrows to bills, teeth cleanings, and whose turn it is to buy paper towels. We told friends we were fine. We posted a vacation photo from a trip that felt like a meeting. One evening, she snapped when I asked about dinner plans. "Not everything revolves around your schedule, Alex." It stung because it landed true. I apologized, washed the dishes, and worked another hour. Later, I found a wine glass by the sink with lipstick I didn't recognize. Maybe a friend stopped by. Maybe not. I set it in the dishwasher, closed the door gently, and heard the quiet grow louder. Trust is a muscle we keep lifting, or it withers. I kept lifting. I turned down a happy hour to surprise Brooke with her favorite takeout and a note on the counter. "Rain check on us." She was swamped, home after midnight, perfume sharp, apology soft. I told myself marriage is ebb and flow, that love isn't a movie montage, it's showing up when plans change. I ordered a small bouquet for Friday, the cheap kind that still tries. We talked about paying off the car early and maybe adopting a dog from the shelter off 1960. I fixed a leaky faucet, felt useful, and chose faith again. If you're older than 30, you know this bargain. You bet on the person you married, even when the odds get weird. That night, I backed up my project to a new drive, labeled it neatly, and slid it in a drawer. I turned off the light, kissed her forehead, and promised tomorrow would be better. The signs were there, arranged like furniture you stop seeing. The late nights, the careful questions about my little side project, the way Mark knew when I'd be in early or out late. I chalked it up to routine, to the rhythm of careers and marriages grown busy. Then a small thing snapped into focus. A calendar invite I never sent, synced to a meeting I didn't know about. I opened a folder I didn't remember creating and found a draft with my language. Edited, renamed, exported. Nothing violent, nothing dramatic, just precise. Like a lock turned with the right key. My stomach went cold. In that moment, the past year and a half lined up like mile markers on I-45. Steady, planned, intentional. I thought I was steering our life. I was being steered. If you've ever felt a room tilt while you're standing still, you'll understand. I closed the laptop, sat very still, and realized the truth. This had been staged for 18 months. Tuesday started like any other. Coffee too hot, traffic too long, emails too many. At 9:12, my screen lit up. Alex, can you swing by? Mark never swung anything. I knew the tone. I straightened my shirt, wiped powdered sugar from a kolache I didn't need, and rode the elevator up. Older folks know that elevator feeling, the hum that says, "This floor changes things." His assistant wouldn't meet my eyes. The glass walls looked cleaner than usual, like someone polished them for a ceremony. Mark stood by the window, hands in his pockets, city spread behind him like a postcard he owned. "Close the door," he said, gentle as a dentist. I closed it and thought about insurance, car payments, and the lawn I still hadn't edged. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's talk head count." I felt my shoulders square up on their own. I told myself it was a routine talk. It wasn't. He gestured to the chair, and the ground under Houston shifted. He started with praise. 3 years, solid work, team player. The pregame speech before the loss. Then the phrase every grown man has heard at least once. Budget cuts. Nothing personal. He slid a folder across the desk like a menu. Severance. HR. Return your badge by 5. My ears rang, the way they do when a smoke alarm test goes a second too long. I asked what I always ask. What did I miss? What could I fix? He tilted his head, kind, sorrowful, practiced. "This is bigger than you." People over 30 know that sentence. It means the decision was made long before your chair got warm. I signed where I had to. I shook his hand because my father raised me that way. He held on a beat too long, a pastor's squeeze at a funeral. "You'll land on your feet," he said. Outside, the hallway felt colder. I pressed the elevator button and watched my reflection shrink. HR had the box ready. Brown cardboard, thin walls, like the kind that collapses if you look at it hard. I packed the usual. A mug with a cracked handle, a couple of ballpoint pens that only write if you scribble first, a picture of Brooke and me at the closing on our house. The succulent sat on the windowsill, brave and ragged. I watered it too much at first, then not enough. It lived anyway, like most of us. I set it in a corner of the box and felt ridiculous for caring. The security guard tried small talk, weather, the Astros, anything but this. I scanned my badge one last time and it turned red. That beep is a door slamming on your identity. If you've carried a box through a lobby, you know the weight isn't in the cardboard. It's in the eyes that look away. Outside, the air tasted like metal. I put the box in the trunk and sat still, hands on the wheel. Traffic on I-45 crawled, which gave my thoughts too much room. I practiced the talk with Brooke. Calm, factual, next steps. We'd order takeout, update the budget, put off the vacation. Older couples do this math. It's not the end of the world, it's a Wednesday. I plan to stop for a decent bottle of wine and her favorite chocolate, the one with sea salt she pretends not to like because it's expensive. I pictured us at the kitchen table, bills spread out, a team again. A truck cut in front of me and I braked hard. Radio fell silent, like even it knew not to interrupt. I remembered the $25 million contract in my bag, the one that finally proved my late nights weren't a hobby. I planned to share that last, a small spark in a dark hour. The light turned green and I told myself we'd be okay. I turned onto our street, and the house looked ordinary in a way that now feels criminal. I carried the box in one arm, keys in the other, rehearsed smile locked in. The house smelled like the candle Brooke likes, vanilla with some fancy name. I called out, no answer. Our bedroom door was half closed. We never leave it that way. I nudged it with my foot and time went strange. They were there, on sheets I worked overtime to buy. Not scrambling, not sorry, just interrupted. If you've lived long enough, you know the freeze before the burn, the part of your brain that logs details you'll hate later. Her hair perfect, his watch on the nightstand, sunlight on the dresser. My mouth went dry. I set the box down without knowing I had. The succulent tipped and rolled, soil like coffee grounds on the rug. "Alex," she said, more annoyed than afraid. He smirked, the kind of smirk that makes decent men see red. I didn't shout. I couldn't. I reached into my bag for the contract and the folder slipped. The folder landed like a weak slap. Papers fanned across the hardwood, contracts and exhibits, my proof of something good in a bad week. Brooke didn't move to cover herself. She rolled her eyes like I'd walked in during her show. Mark sat up with that practiced calm, the calm of a man who thinks rooms belong to him. "You should have seen this coming," he said, voice soft and cruel. "Shock isn't loud. It's a quiet room with a fire alarm in your chest." I picked up one page, then another, fingers shaking in a way I'll never admit to anyone but you. The heading read exactly what I'd dreamed about for months. I wanted to tell her, to tell someone, that I'd finally been seen. Instead, I stared at the two people who chose me last and hurt me first. Older viewers will understand. There's a before and an after. I crossed that line standing barefoot on our expensive taste. I don't remember sitting down, but I was on the edge of the bed, contract pages under my palm like napkins at a bad diner. My mind sprinted in circles. Mortgage, car, health insurance, the dog we hadn't adopted, my mother's birthday on Sunday. Brooke asked if I was done. Done what? Being married? Being blind? Mark swung his legs over the side, unbothered, the way rich men in movies pour whiskey while the house burns. "Business is business," he said. I laughed once. A single broken sound. Older men will know it. It's the laugh you make when a part of you packs its things. I stood, gathered the papers, and something inside me went still. Not numb, still. Clarity sometimes arrives like cold air after a storm. I looked at the door, then at them, and felt the strangest, smallest mercy. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't begged. I had one thing left they didn't know about, and that was enough. The number looked obscene in my shaking hands. $25 million. It wasn't a lottery ticket. It was work. It was nights and weekends, 1,000 small choices stacked like bricks. Brooke glanced at the page, unimpressed. "Is that real?" she asked, the way you ask if the weather app is right. Mark didn't even look. "We'll handle the paperwork," he said, like we were colleagues reviewing a memo. No, we wouldn't. I slid the top sheet back into the folder, slow on purpose. "This is mine." He smiled the way men smile when they believe you can't afford a lawyer. "We'll see." The page with the signature, mine, caught the light. I thought about every long drive, every late coffee, every ignored text. I felt my spine straighten. Older viewers know this feeling, when you stop defending yourself and start deciding. I tucked the contract away and finally spoke clearly. "Get out." It wasn't loud. It was final. He didn't move. Yet. Mark's smirk is what I remember when I wake at 3 a.m. That slight lift, that patient cruelty. "Buddy," he said, "you're out of your depth." Men like him say buddy when they're about to take your chair. He picked his watch up and fastened it slowly, like punctuation. Brooke stared past me, already living in a future where I didn't exist. I thought of my dad teaching me to shake hands firm, to look a man in the eye, to walk away when the table is crooked. I did all three. I held his gaze long enough for silence to do its job. Then I left the room I painted, the bed I paid for, the life I kept patching. In the hallway, the house looked different, like a set after the actors go home. Older folks say, "You'll see who people are when it costs them." It had. At the front door, I gripped the handle and made the first good choice of that day. I drove without music. I don't recommend that on a day like this, but sometimes the quiet is the only honest thing in the room. I pulled into a grocery store lot and sat there, staring at the cart return. Couples loaded paper towels and grilled chicken like nothing cosmic ever happens under fluorescent lights. I called no one. I bought nothing. I checked the contract again and whispered a thank you to nobody in particular. Then the other shoe dropped. The little details I'd ignored, the timing, the access, the way Mark always knew my schedule. If you've ever looked back and seen the pattern, you know the chill that comes with it. I opened my email and found a thread I shouldn't have seen, a calendar note I didn't create, a file I didn't name. It clicked into place like a lock. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. 18 months long. I started the car. The surface had cracked. The iceberg was waiting. I started small. Search bar, a few names, a date range. I wasn't hacking. I was looking at what was already mine. Notifications, calendar pings, shared with you links I'd ignored. An old email popped up. Innocuous subject, forwarded twice. Inside? A screenshot of my project dashboard I'd never sent. The sender was a generic address, but the timestamp matched nights I'd worked late while Brooke caught up in the other room. I clicked another link and found a meeting note where Mark referenced a milestone I hadn't shared. The pattern formed like damp on drywall, slow, ugly, undeniable. For folks over 30, you know that mixture of rage and common sense. I took a breath, hit record on my phone, and spoke the date, time, and what I was seeing. I wasn't going to shout into the wind. I was going to build a record. One more click opened a folder labeled Linov. My pulse jumped. I hovered over it. Then I pressed open. The documents weren't fancy. That almost made it worse. A logo in a stock font, Lancaster Innovations LLC, filing dates, signatures, a P.O. box in River Oaks. I scrolled and found a blurb about logistics optimization software that read like my resume had been cut into strips and taped back together. There were invoices from TechFlow's corporate card paying consulting fees to this LLC. The numbers weren't huge, but steady, month after month. I saved PDFs to a fresh drive, named clean, time-stamped, duplicated. Older adults will nod here. Paper trails don't care about charm. They just sit there until someone reads them. I printed one page and held it in my hands like a diagnosis. Somewhere between shock and clarity, a calmer voice took over. Close the gaps, connect the dots, stay quiet. I opened the media folder. Photos of notebooks. My notebooks. Not scans, phone pics, angled, fast. The room spun once, then it steadied. I knew where those pictures were taken. The first image was crooked, my handwriting at the corner, a routing rule I'd sketched by the coffee maker. The second, a labored diagram I drew at 1 a.m., still in sweatpants. Tiny details betrayed the taker: our granite counter, a chipped mug Brooke hated, and the blue dish towel we bought on clearance. Her phone case even photobombed the edge. I felt the kind of nausea that comes from realizing the betrayal didn't require skill, only proximity. She didn't break into a vault. She walked into our kitchen. If you've lived long enough, you know that pain. The front door used as a side door to your life. I checked metadata. Dates matched her late nights. I backed everything up again. I wanted to be angry. I was, but something else grew louder. A need to stay methodical. A sloppy man yells. A prepared man documents. I opened a subfolder labeled Patent Draft. I exhaled through my nose, slow, and clicked. The draft patent read like a magic trick where the magician explains your trick to the audience and takes the bow. Claims, diagrams, prior art quotes, where my own phrasing, my shortcuts and metaphors, had been sanded down to corporate language. The inventors listed: Mark Reynolds and Brooke Lancaster. Not a hint of Alex Carter, the man who spilled coffee on those notebooks and coded until the dawn birds complained. I printed the page that mattered most, the claim set that mirrored my core idea. Not jargon, just the bones. If you're over 30, you understand how it feels when your work becomes a suit someone else wears. I grabbed a sticky note and wrote 2 words: not yours. Then I called a number I'd been given once by a friend who'd survived a partnership gone ugly, a forensic investigator. Her name was Natalie. My hands were steady now. The panic was shrinking. The plan, their plan, was in my lap. Time to write mine. Natalie asked for patience and receipts. I had both. We spent 2 days sorting through statements like we were doing taxes for a messy stranger. Hotel charges marked as conference. Spa weekends coded off-site. Transfers from TechFlow to Lancaster Innovations with market research in the memo line. It wasn't cinematic. It was tedious. That's what fraud looks like up close. Boring until it's handcuffs. Meanwhile, at home, the silence grew teeth. Brooke and I moved like co-workers sharing a kitchen. Older couples will recognize the choreography. 2 people who can't decide whether to argue or pretend. She floated the idea of space. I said we needed the truth. She said I was paranoid. I didn't raise my voice. I asked for names, dates, a password I already had. She wouldn't meet my eyes. That night, I took my pillow to the guest room and slept like a man learning to breathe underwater. In the morning, Natalie called. "You need to see this," she said. Before I could get to Natalie's office, Brooke texted, "My parents want to help. Family meeting, tonight." The Lancasters don't invite, they summon. Charles and Vivian live in River Oaks behind a gate that makes delivery drivers pray for a code. Their driveway could host a 4th of July parade. I changed my shirt, shaved, and drove over with a folder that felt too thin for what it had to do. Older viewers will get this ritual, the meeting where money equals certainty and you're meant to nod along. At the door, a man with a face like a security camera took my name. Inside, a chandelier tried too hard. Vivian greeted me with air-kiss politeness. Charles held court with a glass that caught the light like it owed him. "Let's clear the air," he said, as if air was something he owned. I sat on a couch that swallowed men like me. If they wanted a show, I brought a script. Their living room looked like a museum reluctantly open to the public. Art that probably had insurance policies, rugs with names, not prices. I kept my hands folded and my eyes forward. Vivian led with concern, the curated kind. "We're worried about Brooke's stability," she said, as if I were a weather pattern. Charles leaned in. "We hear you've had employment changes." I smiled once, politely, and let the pause work. "I have," I said, "and I've had offers." Brooke entered then, glowing in a dress that wanted attention. She sat beside her mother, not me. Older adults know that seat choice is a sentence. They asked me to be reasonable. I asked them to be honest. Vivian mentioned a company, Lancaster Innovations, as if it were a charity. Charles nodded at Mark's potential. I watched their mouths move and thought of the emails, the invoices, the photos taken in my kitchen. My phone buzzed. Natalie again. I silenced it. My turn was coming. "Alex," Charles began, "this arrangement isn't working. Brooke needs a partner who understands her world." Vivian's pearls clicked like a metronome for judgment. Brooke stared at the mantel, calm as a weather vane on a still day. "Mark offers stability," Vivian added, softer than a threat, sharper than a knife. "Older viewers have heard versions of this. You're good, but not for us." I asked a simple question. "Did you help form Lancaster Innovations?" Silence measures character. Their eyes blinked in the same rhythm. "Our attorneys handle many matters," Charles said, which means yes, without the dignity of it. I placed a single page on the table, an LLC filing with a familiar signature. Vivian's smile cracked. "This is inappropriate," she snapped. I kept my voice low. "So is theft." Brooke finally looked at me, bored more than angry. "You can't win this." My phone lit again. Natalie's text. "Bring them receipts." I'd brought a few. One more thing remained. I slid the contract across the coffee table. It had weight, like a bowling ball in paper form. Charles leaned forward with the hunger of a man who reads balance sheets for sport. Vivian pretended not to care and failed. Brooke scanned the first page, then the signature. David Park's name carried power even in that room. "$25 million?" Charles repeated, tasting the number. I nodded. "Signed last week. Exclusive." For folks over 30, you know the satisfaction when truth walks in wearing shoes money recognizes. Vivian's posture shifted. Barely, but enough. Brooke's jaw set. "It doesn't change anything," she said, and for the first time her voice trembled. "It changes who's holding the microphone," I replied. I let the quiet settle like dust on an expensive frame. Then I gathered the papers, slid them back into the folder, and stood. "We're done here," I said. I didn't slam a door. I didn't curse. I left them with a number they couldn't spin. Outside, the River Oaks air smelled like watered lawns and money. I sat in my car and finally returned Natalie's call. "I've got them looking at a number they can't swallow," I said. She didn't waste time. "Good. Now we give them a meal they can't digest." She laid out what she'd found. Bank records, expense reports, emails that read like they were daring a judge to get involved. "You're not crazy," she said. "You're targeted." Older adults will understand the relief that comes from a name for the storm. I felt my shoulders drop for the first time in days. We set a plan. Copy everything, timestamp everything, move fast, keep calm. I looked back at the mansion and realized that what felt like the final scene was only the overture. The real music would play in public, with lights and witnesses. I started the engine. My hands were steady. "Let's begin," I told Natalie. And for once, I meant begin. The new place smelled like old carpet and last year's arguments. The AC rattled, the blinds leaned, and the fridge hummed like it missed better days. I slept on a borrowed mattress and ate noodles from a chipped bowl. There's a kind of quiet you meet in your 30s that isn't peace, it's inventory. I made lists, cancel memberships, move the 401k, call my mother, don't call Brooke. I jogged 1 block, got winded, came back, and stared at a water stain shaped like Texas. Older folks know this stretch. When pride says, "I'm fine," but your bank app says, "Prove it." I stacked the contract copy on the table, set my laptop beside it, and promised myself I'd move 1 inch forward before I slept. The inch I chose was simple. Label every folder, charge every battery, breathe through the next 5 minutes. Then my phone buzzed with a name I'd started to depend on. Natalie. "Open your door." She walked in with 2 coffees, a satchel, and a face that said, "Sleep is optional, but discipline isn't." "Drink," she commanded. Older viewers will recognize the tone. Teacher meets EMT. She scanned my place, opened the blinds, and flipped my laptop like it owed her rent. "We've got work," she said, already plugging in a drive. I tried small talk. She cut it. "Shower. 10 minutes. We're building a timeline." I obeyed, because sometimes mercy sounds like orders. When I came back, she'd spread files across my table. Statements, screenshots, a list of dates that matched the whispers in my head. "We'll start with money," she said. "Money tells the truth even when people don't." She handed me a yellow pad. "Every charge that smells like a lie, highlight it, then we color code." I laughed once. "Color coding our way out of hell?" She didn't blink. 1 shade at a time. We clinked paper cups like a promise and started digging. Natalie doesn't pep talk. She assigns steps. "You eat while I reconcile." She pushed a sandwich at me like medicine. We worked in silence, the good kind, pens moving, keys clicking, a rhythm older adults will recognize from honest labor. Every time I drifted toward anger, she nudged me back to tasks. Facts first, feelings later. By evening, my table looked like a crime show without the dramatic music. Columns, totals, arrows, copies. She drew a red box around 3 clusters of charges. Spa weekends, Napa, Austin. They called it off-site. We'll call it what it is. She angled the lamp and read dates like coordinates. "These line up with your late nights." I felt shame try to climb my throat. She caught my eye. "You were building. They were spending. That's not on you." The room steadied. The cheap walls felt less tight. She capped the pen and slid a folder across to me. "Ready for the next rung?" I nodded. "Climb." We zoomed into transactions labeled like they were hiding in plain sight. Wellness consulting, executive recovery, market research. The vendors? Spas with eucalyptus steam rooms and hotels that iron the curtains. Older viewers have seen this movie. Luxury camouflaged as strategy. Natalie layered the charges over my calendar. "Here's your push to production," she said, tapping a week I barely slept. "And here's their wine tasting." She clicked again. "Austin offsite aligns with your system test." The receipts whispered names. 2 guests, upgrades, a necklace. The kind Brooke wore at that party. Each line item felt like a door unlocking in reverse. I printed, initialed, dated, breathed. Natalie circled totals with a calm that made space for my anger to cool into resolve. "We're not guessing anymore," she said. "We're mapping." She opened a fresh document titled Timeline of Intent and typed the first line. "Start here, your code milestone, then the spending spree, then the next milestone." The pattern wasn't subtle, it was a blueprint. The TechFlow corporate card told a story HR never hears because no one asks the right questions. Conference fees posted at midnight, working dinners that stretched past room service hours, airfare booked from an account that also paid for flowers. Natalie highlighted a number and whistled low. He got bold. We cross-checked expense reports with social posts, those smiling squares people forget lawyers can read. A toast in Napa, a pool in Austin, captions about grind culture under umbrellas. Older adults know this kind of arrogance, the belief that rules are for other people. I emailed copies to myself and to a cloud I'd never used. 2 backups. 3. Natalie nodded. "Chain of custody is our friend." She pulled a small label maker from her bag and printed Exhibit A. I smiled despite myself. You come prepared. I come to win, she said, sticking the label to a folder. She opened another tab. Now let's look inside TechFlow. The cursor blinked like a drum roll. We followed access logs and shared with notices that should have expired. Files Mark touched had a shadow, someone else peeking over his shoulder with an executive key. He's piggybacking approvals, Natalie said, so nothing pings as unusual. She pointed to a timestamp that landed during a weekend I'd promised Brooke we'd be offline. Except you were online, she added gently, and he knew. We found internal memos that quoted my phrasing almost word for word, then filed it in a folder that lived 2 floors above my pay grade. Older viewers will recognize the feeling. You bring a wrench, they bring a velvet rope. Natalie leaned back. You weren't just ignored. You were mined. The words sat heavy but right. She jotted insider misuse on our timeline. We'll keep it plain. No jargon a jury can trip over. She opened one more folder and froze. Read this. I took the print out and there it was. A sentence short enough to carve into bone. The email wasn't long. He'll never bounce back. Brooke to Mark. My name in the subject. The date landed weeks before my pink slip. Older adults will understand how a short sentence can weigh like a filing cabinet. I read it twice and felt the floor tilt, then settle. Natalie watched me, not the page. Say it out loud, she said. It's part of getting your footing. I did quietly, like a man reading a headstone. The sting brought clarity, not collapse. This wasn't personal drama. It was a documented campaign. I drew a small box around the sentence and wrote motive beside it. Then I put the page in a sleeve like it deserved airtight storage. Natalie nodded once. Now you're thinking like a plaintiff. She pulled out her phone. Time to bring in someone who eats this for breakfast. I knew the name. I'd heard the stories. She dialed. Daniel, it's Natalie. I've got one for you. She looked at me and mouthed, Shark. He arrived the next morning in a suit that didn't apologize for itself and shoes that made carpet nervous. Call me Daniel, he said, handshake firm, eyes firmer. Older viewers have met this type, polite until there's a reason not to be. He didn't waste words. I'll read, you talk. Natalie fills gaps. We laid out our mosaic, receipts, emails, access logs, the patent draft with my work wearing their names. He read fast, marking margins with a pen that clicked like a metronome. Good chain, clean labels, no theatrics, he said, which felt like a compliment. He asked 3 questions I didn't know I needed. Did I disclose my side work? Where is every backup stored? Who else knew? I answered straight. He nodded once, a verdict. We have fraud, we have conspiracy, we have IP theft, and we have them arrogant. He closed the folder like a judge closing court. I'll draft. You stay quiet. Natalie, lock down the rest. Daniel thinks in steps, not speeches. Bank records, then emails, then recordings if we have them. He assigned tasks like a coach at halftime. To me, log every late night with a simple sentence. No heroics, just facts. To Natalie, pull corporate policies, expense guidelines, and any audit red flags. To himself, draft complaints that read like a roadmap a jury could drive at night. Older adults will appreciate the discipline. No victory laps, just blocking and tackling. He prepped witness lists, subpoena targets, and a public filing timeline. We file when it hurts, he said, not just when it's ready. He rehearsed me on one line until it felt like my heartbeat. I built this on my own time, with my own equipment. We practiced pauses. We practiced not filling silence. When we finished, he looked satisfied in the way storms look organized on radar. They think you're alone, he said, gathering papers. They're wrong. He checked his watch. Tomorrow, we move. The night before filing, I walked the block and counted porch lights. People inside cooked, argued, laughed, lives proceeding without a headline. I breathed until the cheap air felt clean. Back home, I placed 3 things on the table: my contract copy, a photo of the house in the woodlands, and the page with Brooke's sentence. They looked like past, present, and charge. Natalie texted a final checklist. Daniel emailed a calendar. 9:00 a.m., clerk's office. I set 2 alarms and shaved like it mattered. Older viewers will know this ritual before a big day, the small order you impose on a world that tried to take it. I whispered a simple promise to myself. No rage, no theatrics, no detours. Just facts. At 11:57, my phone lit up with an unknown number and a message that read like a dare. Careful, Alex. You don't know who you're poking. I looked at the screen, then at my stack of proof, and smiled. Oh, I do. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, heavy enough to feel rude. Gold script announced Brooke and Mark's engagement, River Oaks, cocktail attire, valet provided, as if embarrassment needed directions. I set it on my cheap table and stared like it might blink first. Older adults will recognize this fork in the road, show up and risk dignity, or stay home and let the story write itself without you. Daniel said, strategically, it's optional. Natalie said, emotionally, choose the version of you you'll respect tomorrow. I brewed bad coffee and paced until the mug went cold. I pictured them toasting, my name tossed around as a cautionary tale. I pictured silence if I didn't go. I ironed my only decent shirt, a collar that tries hard, and rehearsed one rule: no scenes. If I went, it would be as quiet weather, steady, inevitable. I slid the invitation back in its envelope, grabbed my keys, and heard my father's voice. Stand up straight. I stood. River Oaks has a way of making your car feel smaller. The streets curve like a signature, lawns mowed by geometry, hedges that never met a stray leaf. I rolled down the window for air that smelled like sprinklers and privilege. Older viewers will know this drive, the one where you talk to yourself so you don't talk to the wrong person later. I set simple limits. Shake hands if offered, smile without teeth, leave early if my pulse starts to drum. Valet took my keys with the cadence of someone who could park a jet. Inside the gate, I followed lanterns down a path like a magazine spread, string lights in the trees, a quartet in the corner, laughter tuned to money. I kept my shoulders back and my pace even. A server offered champagne. I took water. We all pick our battles. I stepped into the glow of a house that believes in itself, and for a second, felt very small. Then I remembered. I brought a name. The mansion had a foyer that made shoes whisper. Marble underfoot, art that looked insured, a staircase designed to announce people. I found a corner with a decent sightline, the oldest trick in the book for men who prefer exits to entrances. Brooke floated through guests like a well-rehearsed melody, hand on arms, eye contact, the language of the polished. She looked like a commercial for winning. Mark worked the room with a refilled glass and a voice calibrated to carry. Older adults have seen these rooms, where names are currency and laughter clocks the pace of deals. I recognized 3 faces from the business pages. They recognized me as a cautionary footnote. One woman asked, "Are you Alex?" I said yes, the way you do when you know your name's been in rooms without you. She nodded with that polite pity people reserve for weather that ruined their picnic. I checked my watch and breathed. The night was just getting started. Brooke claimed a spot near the fireplace, a stage framed by arrangements that cost rent in other zip codes. She wore a dress that caught the chandelier like it was choreographed. To new beginnings, she told a circle of admirers, her smile as steady as the tide. Older viewers will understand this theater, the curated version of a life presented like a product launch. She glanced past me without pausing, which stung less than I expected. I watched her hand rest on Mark's sleeve with the ease of something practiced. She laughed at a joke he hadn't finished. Someone said my name, and she turned, face smooth as marble. "Alex," she said, like a dentist greeting a walk-in. "Thank you for coming." I nodded. Wouldn't miss it. The room hushed just a degree, people sensing a story they hoped would perform. I swallowed the impulse to deliver lines I'd regret. I chose water again. Mark raised his glass and tapped it with a ring. The pitch was coming. "Tonight is about alignment," Mark began, stealing corporate words for romance. He thanked the families, praised Brooke's vision, and nodded toward the journey. He scanned the room like a man receiving light he assumed was his. "We're surrounded by people who understand ambition," he said, eyes skating past mine. "People who keep up." Older adults will hear the undertone. It's the sermon that tells you who's welcome in the church. The crowd chuckled at lines smooth from practice. He rapped with a flourish. To leaving the past where it belongs. Glasses lifted, cameras blinked. My water felt heavier. I pictured my table at home, receipts, timelines, a sentence in a sleeve. I pictured Daniel's clockwork and Natalie's checklists. And then, under the violin and the chirp of social media, I felt something shift in the room I couldn't name. Heads turned toward the entry. The quartet paused on a note that didn't want to end. Mark's face twitched, just once, like a screen refreshing. David Park walked in like time decided to stand up straighter. Not tall, not loud, just present. People moved without seeming to, creating space the way water finds a path. Older viewers have seen this phenomenon, the quiet center around which the evening reorganizes. He shook hands the way leaders do. 2 seconds, eye contact, names memorized without glancing. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. When his gaze reached me, he smiled like we'd kept a promise. "Alex," he said, voice warm with purpose. The circle around Brooke shifted, recalculating. Mark's glass hovered midair. "I thought you were in Singapore," someone murmured. David set his coat on an armchair like it wasn't whispered about in business journals. "Change of plans," he said. He stepped onto the soft rug near the fireplace and lifted his voice just enough. "Before we toast any further, I should say why I'm here." The hush this time wasn't curiosity, it was anticipation. Even the chandelier listened. He crossed the room toward me, not them. Walked straight past the money, past the marble, past the smiles calibrated for lenses. "Alex Carter," he said, holding out a hand that meant to be seen. The kind of handshake older adults teach their sons. Firm, present, not a contest. "Glad we're partners." The word hung like a banner. Murmurs rose, cameras re-aimed. Mark's smile calcified. Brooke's posture straightened a fraction too fast. "Partners?" someone repeated, trying the syllables like a new wine. David kept it simple. "When I see a builder, I invest." He looked at me, not through me. "We signed last week." He didn't say the number yet. He didn't need to. The room's temperature changed anyway. I felt the quiet kind of pride, the one that doesn't fist pump, just breathes. I nodded once, not to gloat, but to confirm. In the corner, a server forgot to move. Somewhere, a phone recorded for history's favorite hobby, replay. David doesn't waste decimals on crowd work. 25 million, he said, clear as a bell in church. That's our starting commitment to Alex's platform. The market impact over 5 years, north of $1 billion. The words hit the room in waves. First the gasp, then the math. Older adults will know the sound money makes without making a sound at all. Shifting weight, redirected attention, a chorus of recalculated futures. I let him do the talking. I'd already done the work. He described outcomes, not gadgets. Fewer shortages, faster routes, real things in real hands on time. He thanked whoever kept Alex hungry enough to build nights and weekends. A line that landed like a gentle slap. Cameras caught Brooke's jaw tighten, Mark's grip whiten on his glass. David finished not with a flourish but with a nod. To builders. Glasses lifted, not all of them. I held my water and looked at the 2 people who used to narrate my life. Their captions were failing. It's strange what you remember. The way Brooke's fingers hovered near her necklace like it might coach her through the moment. The way Mark blinked too slowly, like buffering. A woman who'd pitied me earlier shifted her sympathy 2 feet to the left without moving her shoes. Older viewers know this pivot, crowds siding with the tide. A man slapped my shoulder with the enthusiasm of small talk that wants a business card. I gave him a nod and nothing else. Across the room, Vivian Lancaster rearranged her expression into proud matriarch and failed somewhere around the eyes. Charles stared at the contract copy peeking from my pocket like it mocked his stationery. The quartet found a safe melody. David chatted with a cluster that used to orbit Mark. I kept my promise. No scenes. I breathed. I stood up straight. I stayed human. Then I felt my phone buzz. Daniel. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., clerk's office. Showtime. I slipped the phone away and smiled without teeth. By the time valet brought my car, the night air had cooled. The kind of Houston grace older adults appreciate. A small mercy after heat. I tipped, sat, and let the door thump shut on the kind of room that writes its own press. My hands were steady on the wheel. The victory didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like a level, finally. I replayed the moment David said the number, not to savor it, but to lock in the truth. I hadn't been crazy. I'd been right. The mansion shrank in the rear view, lights smearing on the glass. Natalie texted a thumbs-up emoji she rarely uses. Daniel sent a calendar invite that might as well have been a drumbeat. Tomorrow wasn't cleanup. It was attack. I drove past a gas station, a quiet diner, a couple arguing by their trunk, regular life resuming on schedule. I whispered, "Facts, not fists," and parked under a streetlight that hummed like resolve. The night was over. The fight was finally beginning. We met at the clerk's office at 9 a.m. sharp, Daniel in a suit that looked like decisions, Natalie with a tote full of proof, me with a spine I hadn't felt in months. Older adults will recognize the ritual, numbers in order, pages squared, breath steady. Daniel slid the complaints across the counter, fraud, conspiracy, IP theft, then checked his watch like a man catching a train he scheduled. "Clock starts now," he said. We walked out into Houston heat that pressed its palm on your chest. I expected trumpets. Instead, paperwork and sunlight. Natalie squeezed my shoulder. "You did the hard part. Now we make it public." She'd already arranged the process servers, the calendar, the media packet labeled facts only. I took a sip of terrible hallway coffee and laughed because it tasted like victory anyway. Daniel's phone buzzed. He read, nodded once. "They'll be served at brunch," he said. "Four Seasons, private room." I felt the smallest mercy. Consequences would be catered. If you've ever been to Sunday brunch at the Four Seasons, you know the sound. Cutlery like polite rain, conversations pitched to be overheard. We waited in the lobby while the process server, Tony, walked in with the confidence of a man who's seen worse reactions than ruined eggs Benedict. Natalie tracked his dot on a shared map. "Room 312, she whispered, like a play-by-play on AM radio. I pictured Brooke's mother rehearsing hospitality and Mark rehearsing denial. Tony texted, "Approaching table." Daniel's mouth tightened into a line a jury would trust. Then the photo came in, envelopes delivered, surprise on faces that usually schedule surprises. A second later, "We have a drink thrown." Natalie grinned. Predictable. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding. We didn't cheer. We didn't gloat. We stood up, shook hands like it was a normal appointment, and walked to the parking lot. Older adults will appreciate this. Sometimes the cleanest win is not being in the room when the storm breaks. The details arrived like gossip with receipts. Brooke grabbed a mimosa and aimed at Tony. It missed and baptized Charles instead. Orange, bubbles, the stain of entitlement. Vivian's pearls clacked Morse code for lawsuit. Mark demanded a manager, then realized managers don't stop federal processes. Older adults know that moment when a mask slips. New voice, old character. Tony texted a final update. Service complete. Witnesses plentiful. Daniel archived the photos. "Let them perform," he said. "We'll bring facts." In the car, I stared at my hands. They weren't shaking. Natalie handed me a bottle of water like I'd just finished a run. "Media will nibble by afternoon," she said. "We'll feed them one plate. Documentation." I nodded, grateful for the simplicity. No speeches, no threats. We drove in silence past families loading strollers, past a couple arguing softly, past a man reading the paper like Sunday still held. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. I'd learned. By evening, the story had legs, local news, a business blog, then a national feed that loves a clean villain. I watched on mute while anchors shaped sentences around what we'd filed. Older viewers will recognize the rhythm. Alleged. Documents show. Sources confirm. Daniel did one interview, measured, dry, with sentences that fit in court transcripts. Natalie posted a single statement. "We trust the process." I stayed off social, took a walk, and waved at a neighbor hosing his driveway. He waved back the way older men do, chin up, no commentary. Back home, I listened to a voicemail from a reporter fishing for fireworks. I deleted it. Another message came from a friend who'd believed the rumors. If this is true, I'm sorry. The apology didn't fix anything, but it stopped a small leak inside me. Daniel emailed the hearing date. Natalie sent me a packing list that sounded like a field trip for grown-ups. Snacks, chargers, patience. I set everything by the door and slept. Courthouse mornings have a hum, fluorescence, footsteps, the shuffle of lives waiting their turn. We sat behind our stack, bank records, emails, expense reports, the patent draft that stole my name and sanded off my fingerprints. Daniel spoke like he was laying bricks. No flourishes, just weight. Older adults would have approved. No ranting, no grandstanding, only sentences that fit neatly into exhibit. The other side arrived polished and loud, a parade of confidence with cufflinks. They argued about context. We offered dates. They gestured. We pointed. Natalie slid each tab into Daniel's hand at the right moment, a quiet metronome. When the judge asked a clarifying question, Daniel answered in 10 words. The air shifted. You feel it when the room tilts toward the truth. At lunch, I ate half a turkey sandwich and thought about how ordinary bread can be on the most extraordinary days. We went back in. The afternoon promised testimony. I tightened my tie and stared at the seal above the bench. Brooke took the stand in a dress that tried to be a closing argument. The oath sounded colder, echoing around her answers. She started polished, PR tone, practiced pauses, but paper outruns polish. Daniel walked her through timestamps like stepping stones she didn't know were there. Is this your email? Yes. Is that your signature? Yes. The room doesn't clap for truth. It just breathes different. Older adults know this chair. It doesn't care how you look in pictures. It cares what you did. When Daniel read the line, he'll never bounce back, she tried to pivot. Taken out of context. He handed her the full thread. Context became confession. The voice got sharper, the answers longer, the patience shorter. By the time her mother shifted in the gallery, you could feel the tide leave. Brooke reached for steel she didn't have, then for sympathy she hadn't earned. The judge called a recess. In the hallway, Vivian stared at the floor like it owed her something. It didn't. Mark's calm cracked on Cross. He talked like the room belonged to him until the receipts turned the lights on. Daniel stayed surgical. No insults, no heat. Just, is this accurate? Over and over until the word yes sounded like a verdict. Older viewers know that kind of discipline. It wins wars without noise. Closing arguments were brief. We didn't ask the court to feel. We asked it to read. The decision came faster than I expected, slower than my heart wished. Liability on fraud, conspiracy, intellectual property theft, sanctions, restitution, and then the words that change addresses, federal time. I didn't fist pump. I didn't smirk. I looked at the seal again and thought about every night I'd worked while someone else planned shortcuts. The marshal's footsteps were steady. Brooke didn't look back. Mark did, once, like a man who finally met a door that wouldn't open for him. We stepped outside into heat that felt honest. Natalie exhaled. Daniel checked his watch. Next chapter, he said. Grief and fury are fuel if you burn them right. I took the first check I ever wrote to myself. 10 million, and seeded Phoenix Ventures. Not a revenge fund, a rebuild fund. Older adults will recognize the model, disciplined, boring on paper, life-changing in practice. We found founders whose stories sounded like mine. Betrayal in plain sight, work stolen with a smile, doors closed by people who owned the keys. We didn't promise miracles. We promised process, clean cap tables, tight contracts, legal firepower before the fire. Natalie ran diligence like a drill sergeant with grace. Daniel structured deals that could survive bad weather. I met with entrepreneurs in coffee shops that smelled like hope and exhaustion and told them the one sentence Daniel drilled into me. You built this with your own time and tools. The first 12 investments felt like planting trees after a burn. Shoots showed, then growth, then shade. One morning I realized I'd stopped checking over my shoulder to breathe. A year later, we booked the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, not for flash, but for symbolism. Art survives critique. Builders survive betrayal. Older adults walked the galleries beside 20-somethings in hoodies, donors beside coders, the mix I'd always wanted to see. We kept the program short. Founders spoke in plain sentences about shipments that arrived, patients who got meds on time, paychecks that didn't bounce. Natalie stood at the back and smiled exactly once when a shy engineer thanked her for believing like a prosecutor. Daniel accepted a joke plaque that said, "Facts, not fists," and pretended he hated it. David Park raised a glass to boring systems that save lives, and the applause felt earned, not loud. I found a quiet corner near a sculpture that looked like resilience and called my mom. "I'm okay," I said. She said she knew. On the ride home, Houston lights slid past like steady heartbeats. Tomorrow would be busy. Tonight, I let the quiet win. Camera on, no music, just breath. I'm Alex Carter. I lost a career, a marriage, and the part of me that trusted without checking. I didn't swing harder. I learned to aim. I turned all that heat into fuel. Today, Phoenix Ventures backs builders who were counted out, and the math is simple. Billions in value, but the real return is quiet. Paychecks that clear, trucks that arrive, families that breathe easier. That's the message. Facts, not fists. Revenge felt loud for a minute. Rising stays loud for a lifetime. If you're over 30, you know the truth I learned. The best win isn't watching enemies fail. It's living so well their predictions look small. I can't give you back lost years. I can hand you a match and a map. So here's the choice. Clean, honest, yours. Do you want revenge or do you want to rise? Drop it below. Hashtag Team Revenge or hashtag Team Rise. And if you're building after a betrayal, tell me your first step. We'll read them. We'll help. This is only the beginning.